before, but it's a privilege to have them back with us again. And they're under the direction of John Marshall. Some of you are old enough to remember the tuba player here in this band. You knew him when he was a radio announcer on one of the local radio stations, Don Hine, and Don is going to graciously introduce the group. Don?
Hi again, everyone. How are we today? Decent? Yes, this is the New Horizons Band. If you see a lot of gray heads in here, it's because many of us are past 50. As a matter of fact, if you are thinking out there maybe picking up an instrument again, we have two 90-year-olds in our band. Mary Zinkin from the clarinet section, and we just celebrated Clarence's 90th yesterday, Clarence White, in the sax section. Bonnie says, get up. Clarence says, I don't particularly want to. Yeah, there we go, Clarence. Nicely done, and Mary. Now, we have a nice program planned for you this afternoon. You know, I don't think I'd tell you if it was a lousy program. Why did I say that? Three of them are really verstunken, but we're going to play them anyway. Every time I hear the national anthem, it is a stirring thing for me. But some arrangements are better than others, and we picked an interesting one for you this afternoon. A new arrangement of the Star-Spangled Banner. If you will rise with us and sing along with us, you'll like this version too. That is a great arrangement, isn't it? I hope you'd greet our conductor, John Marshall, again. John is a noted adjudicator. How about that word? Yeah. And that's good. That means that he judges a lot of different band things. And in fact, you just did one this weekend, didn't you? Yeah. And they haven't killed him yet, so he must be right most of the time. John spent almost 30 years, maybe more than that, over at Pike High School. We have Sam Linesmith with us. I'll introduce him a little bit later. He spent over 30 years at North Central High School. And Al Spangler is with us also in the conducting department. He's taking it easy today, but he was from Speedway High School for almost 30 years. So we have a lot of experience in the band. We have a lot of rookies like me too. I was just one who liked to play when I was in high school. I was on a basketball scholarship in college, so I didn't play then. And I picked it up again about 20 years ago. You can do it too. Just have to get the lip back in shape again, and you'll remember a lot of the things that you did in high school. Well, we have a lot of different styles of marches for you this afternoon. This first one is interesting, kind of a Spanish style. It was composed by the Mexican composer Jaime Tejedor, and it's called Amparito Roca, which is a little girl's name, a 12-year-old piano student of his. And let's see what we do with this one. This one is Rimon Zipol. More familiar stuff for you here as we go to the golden age of Broadway. We're going to play for you Valley High from South Pacific, Climb Every Mountain, that is from The Sound of Music, the Carousel Waltz, Getting to Know You, and music from Oklahoma. The golden age of Broadway. A great audience as per usual. Move on to some similar music here. This is from Disney at the movies. We're going to start out with Zippity Doo Dah. We have Never Smile at a Crocodile, The Bear, Necessities, Colors of the Wind, a whole bunch of stuff here. But as said, we start out with Zippity Doo Dah, and we'll go from there. But here's in Disney. My wife and I always have devotion together in the mornings, and I thought this was classic. One of our books in which we read from, the headline was, "Be Still." I said, that works right into our program today because we're going to do Be Still My Soul. This was written by a Finnish composer, a gentleman by the name of Jean Sibelius. He was honoring his country initially with the melody, but since no less than 6 hymns have used that as the base. So I know you're going to enjoy this. We're using antiphonal trumpets back here, and you'll see what antiphonal means in a moment. But let's listen to Be Still My Soul. Nice job, trumpets. Very nicely done. If that doesn't give you a goosebump or two, I don't know what does. Well, we're going to have from a more serious number to a fun number here as Sam Linesmith makes his way to the podium. Sam's going to be our conductor on this one. He is the lone member of this band with a Sagamore of the Wabash, huh? Although 2 or 3 of us did deserve it. I won't name anybody here. Now this is a fun number. It's the T for 2 for tubas. So the 2-man tuba section, Leroy Lane and the kid here, get featured in T for 2 for tubas. Zero mistakes. Very nice. Well, I told you at the outset we had several different styles of marches for you to hear today. And this one is a concert march called Valdres. And this is an area apparently in Norway. And it's more like the British march than it is a Sousa. So, see what you think here on Valdres. so nice when everyone quits at the same time. Very nicely done. This next tune is called An Irish Rhapsody. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Claire Grundman. He for many years was one of the great arrangers and composers of band music, symphonic band music, and this is one of his classics here. By the way, Wayne Dunlap on that last one there, nice solo from the trumpet section. I can't always pick up all of the soloists, but he sits close to me, so I knew that he was doing his best. Yeah, Grundman was an Ohio State grad. We won't have to hold that against him. But as I told the last concert we had, an interesting fact about Claire Grundman was that he was one of the co-authors of the 1974 crossword puzzle dictionary, which is pretty spiffy, isn't it? I was just looking in my dictionary yesterday to see if I had that edition, and mine was an 07 or something like that. So, An Irish Rhapsody. You'll recognize many of the tunes in this one. skewed band does not mean that there are not a lot of great players in this band. That's a great sound there too. Nicely done all. I never give credit to our percussion section here either. Nicely done percussion section. Here's another fun piece from a fine Iowa composer. I grew up in Waverly, Iowa, which is a small town of about 7,500 in northeastern Iowa. My father was a minister, and at one time we lived in Sheffield, which was about 12 miles from Mason City, about which 76 trombones is written. Here is Meredith Wilson's, and a great trombone section, by the way, too. So, gentlemen, they are featured. trombone player is one that can gliss. And boy, there are a bunch of them in that way. Well, this is our last number today. Before we leave, I'd like to say what a great audience today, and we appreciate that very much. Thank you. And I understand the food was great too. I have authorized my wife to steal some dessert. This is a curtain call. This is a fun piece. That's what it is, a curtain call.
What a great performance. We have a few more items to take care of, so don't leave us. What a great treat to have this performance. We thank each of you for sharing your talent with us. What a great performance. And thank you for taking time to come share your talents with us. We have birthday celebrations, and Jane Wood wants to do that. While I'm moving the mic to Jane, how many of you played an instrument in high school? Would you hold up your hand? Here are some more recruits.
We have March birthdays today, and when I call your name, if you'll stand up, and then at the end we'll sing happy birthday to you. So for March, I don't see Jeanette Pierce. Is she here? Jeanette Pierce? And I know Herb Everson isn't here. Joe Cunningham.